Welcome back to the channel. To compound or not to compound, that is the question. Is that Shakespeare? That's Shakespeare, isn't it?
I think so.
To something or not to something. I don't know. But to compound, not to compound, let's say you're in a pool and you want to increase your position. So you're getting yields, maybe you're getting 0.5% per day or 1% per day or whatever you're getting. What do you do with that? Should you compound it? Should you not? Should you hold it? Should you sell it, take it for profit? Should you buy some Bitcoin with it instead? Let's talk about it. Colin, what you got?
Yeah. Goodness, there's a lot. There's a lot that goes into this because I get this in the UIG sometimes too of, what should I do with my rewards? Because understand, and I want to talk about this very, very quickly because I don't want to stay too long on this, but where are the rewards coming from? I take two assets, I'm depositing them into a liquidity pool. Users then use that assets to swap their assets back and forth, right? I have asset A, I go to a decentralized exchange, I swap it for asset B, I pay a little fee. That fee then comes to me as a liquidity provider. So then the question is, well, what do I do with those fees? And there's lots of strategies. There's not just one way that you can do this. You can compound it back into the same pool. You can take those rewards, you can compound them into, creating a new position or entirely. You can create one on a separate fee tier on the same assets. You can extract them and put them inside of your bull run bag, like in a separate wallet just for buy and holds. You can convert them into fiat and move them off chain. There's so many different. Yeah, exactly.
That's what I recommend.
There you go. I mean, there's just so many things that you can do. And so the question is, hey, a couple things here, Lucas, too. Different platforms operate in different ways. Some platforms that have auto compounding features, that's the one strategy that they employ, right? And so understand that depending on the different platform that you're using, may also have one or maybe a few different options for you to do it. But I'll just talk straight. If it's a regular decentralized exchange where you have the ability to extract the rewards, should you compound it back into the same position? Or should you hold them on the sidelines, or should you swap into something different? So kind of a different kind of a video here, because this is a little bit more strategy. And we have a lot of these talks in the UIG here, but I think it really comes down to, it's such a weird answer, kind of a cop-out answer, but it kind of depends on what you want, right? Do you want more exposure to those same assets? And if the answer is yes, then there's a couple of different options you can do. All right, I'm going kind of fast. I'll slow that down here for a sec. If I'm in an ETH and USDC, if I'm in an ETH and USDC pool, the question is, do I want to continue to have exposure to ETH and USDC? If the answer is no, well, then we wouldn't want to compound it back in. We would want to take the rewards and then swap it into something else, whether that be Bitcoin or just stablecoin or
that
whatever
might not
else
be
other assets you want.
To bring some context, that might not also be, oh, I don't like ETH. Maybe you just have like 50% of your portfolio is ETH and you're like, I'm just kind of at my limit for that exposure to ETH. I want to get exposure to something else. So it could also be that.
Exactly. The exposure. Yes. Thanks for really highlighting, underlining, and bolding that word, because that's what it is. It's exposure. It doesn't mean that you don't like it or you don't believe in it. It's exposure. So Lucas is 100% right with that. So that's the question. Do you want continued and more exposure to those assets? If the answer is no, well, then there's strategies that we can do. Most likely moving it into another asset or just converting it to stables. That could be an option. Most of the time when we're talking about to compound or not to compound, the answer is yes, right? Yes, I want to have more exposure to those assets. But then the question is, do I take those rewards and put them back into the same pool? Pros and cons, let's talk about it. A couple of pros is that you'll be earning rewards on top of those rewards. And so there's a famous quote out there of the compound effect is like the eighth wonder in the world, right? Something like that. Totally butchered it, but that's just what we do around here. We butcher famous quotes. But that compound effect is real. When you take the rewards and you compound them back into the position, now all of a sudden you're earning rewards on that increased position sizing. So if you want continued exposure to those two assets, that is a very real thing. If you wanted to do that, now I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but if you wanted to do that, we do want to compound as frequently as we can, where it makes sense. Now I'll add a little bit of bonus here for you. If you decide to keep compounding back into that position, we want the gas fee. You want the gas fee ratios to be in control. What do I mean by that? Well, if it's going to cost you 30 cents to perform a few transactions to compound the rewards back into the pool, well, we don't want to compound when we've collected 40 cents in fees, because now the profit margin is really heavily cut into. So maybe we want to wait. And Maria, I want to give Maria a shout out, but Maria has a $5 rule that she compounds as frequently as she can when she reaches $5 in the majority of her pools. I think it's a great plan, because that she's done the math and has figured out, well, based on the profit margin, that $5 level is a good compounding. So now every $5, she's paying a couple cents in fees, but now is compounding the rewards on a much more frequent basis. Okay. Now,
there's a lot
we
to
can
this.
also talk. It is a lot to it. I know. I'm like, Lucas, how do I cram this down into a 10-minute video? Because there's a lot to talk about. Let me know in the
comments if this is helpful, and if you want to expand on anything, just leave it in the comments. We're happy to expand on some of this stuff. Maybe we'll even go live.
Absolutely. For you. No, absolutely. Yeah. And these are the talks we're constantly having in the UIG, because listen to this, Lucas, every position is different. Yeah. Every asset is different. Every investor is different. And so there's no blanket statement of yes, you should compound, or no, you should not compound.
And market conditions too. Like when things are really green, I double down on taking profit, converting to stable coin. When markets are red, I actually compound heavier. So it also depends on that.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's so many different things we could talk about, but yeah, if your strategy, I'll say it like this: if your strategy is to compound as frequently as you can, perhaps looking into a platform that has those two assets that does it for you could be a beneficial thing for you, because then that way you limit the transactions, because when you're doing it manually, you have to pay gas fees. When you're going through a third-party service, they generally do it for you. Take a slice. They usually take a percentage. So anyways, that's a whole nother thing we could talk about, but just, it might be beneficial for you if you want a more passive approach to compounding. You don't have to do it manually. But let's say, Lucas, let's say you are doing it manually for the sake of discussion here. We want to compound as frequently as it can when it makes sense. So I've already discussed that. Now let's say that you want continued exposure to those assets, but maybe you don't want to compound it back into the same pool. Because a big con, or a big downside, I guess, to compounding back into the same position is if the value of the assets in the pool goes down, the entire position also goes down. So I'll say that in a little bit different way as well. When I'm taking ETH and USDC and I'm compounding it back into the same position, and then ETH takes a turn, ETH pulls back, now your entire position is affected by the range that you've set. And so you may get converted out of or converted more into that asset, whether it's going up or down. If you've compounded back in, the entire position is affected. I'm using ETH USDC, which are really big assets, but maybe you're in two really risky assets, or ETH and the Mason token, which is kind of a running joke. But let's just say you're in really risky assets. If you've compounded your entire position into that Mason US and Mace ETH position, and now ETH makes a big run up, or the Mason token has a big drawback, now your entire position might get converted into that Mason token, which might be the asset you don't really want full exposure to. So anyways, what I'm trying to describe here is that when you compound back into the same position, yes, the compound effect takes place, but now you have full exposure. All your rewards are now in that pool. So if there is a big drawback, you might get converted into one of those assets, and that entire dollar value might be in jeopardy, if you will. Not in jeopardy, but it might be affected. Last thing I'll say here is, let's say you don't want to do that. You don't want to compound it back into the same position, but you still want to have exposure to those assets. Well, you could do what I do personally, is I build and I fund my bull run bag, or basically my buy and hold tokens, with the rewards from those pools. Give you an example. If I'm in that Mace and ETH pool, and I don't want to compound it back into that position, because like I've described, everything's affected by the range and the current prices, I can still take the ETH and the Mace tokens and just move them over into a holding position in my bull run bag. Now I still have exposure to those assets, because I still like them. I still want exposure to those assets, but they're not affected by the price range. And so if I still want to have exposure to both ETH and Mace, no matter what my pool does, that is a strategy that I particularly like to do. And that's what I do for a lot of my DeFi positions, is I use my DeFi businesses to fund my bull run bags. And now, no matter what happens with the prices in the ranges in that position, I still have exposure to both ETH and Mace separately in my bag. So now if ETH goes up and Mace goes down, it doesn't matter as much in terms of my DeFi position, because now I have continued exposure to those assets outside. So Lucas, I mean, this is like so much to talk about, but that's the essence, is to compound or not to compound. There are pros and cons to both. That's my TED talk there about that.
Good TED talk. What do you want?
Yes,
and create your strategy around that, and then be flexible in it, pending or depending on market conditions. DeFi is, we always laugh. We're like, oh yeah, we just chose to build a community of people in the most complex, one of the most complex things. So like, we're busy. It's why we have, I think, 8 or 9 people on the team now.
Yes.
Constantly helping members get answers to these kind of questions, because it's not so black and white. It's very dependent, and we really value being there to be able to actually support members. So like, however big of a team we need to build to do so, we're game. But there are a lot of nuances to it. So I think you explained it really, really well. I think this video might be worth watching 2 or 3 times. Hint, hint, if you're watching this, someone on the YouTube channel today said, oh, so many of these videos are just the same now. I'm going to start disliking them. And I get their paradigm and how they're looking at it. I used to be the guy who just wanted to read a book a week. I wanted as much. And I realized, you know what? It's not about that. Now I've been reading this one book for like 2 months, and I keep rereading a page or two. I'm just like, can I get it? Because if you're broke and you're a joke and you're not making any money in DeFi and you're telling me these videos are the same, I would rewatch them 20 times and like actually study it, because it's the application of the information that is actually the wisdom. And I think a lot of people are just TikTok brain. I want more. I want more. I want new. I want 15-second shorts. Like, you're not going to learn anything. Study deeply. This video is probably worth watching 2 or 3 times, if I'm honest. Yes. There was a lot of information in this video.
A lot. Yeah.
A lot. So yeah, that's kind of that. If you liked this video, or if you think there was value in it, like it, subscribe to the channel. And this channel won't grow without your support. So if you think this video could be helpful to someone, I know oftentimes we're building these DeFi portfolios in our silo. No one really gets what we're doing. This is an opportunity to share it with someone and say, hey, we're the bank, and this is what DeFi is. It's not just some internet magic money, although it kind of is, but there's a service we're providing, and we are the bank. So share it with them. This channel won't grow without your support either. So share away. And with that said, I'm going to leave 4 videos on the screen. Let's dive deeper. Remember, it's not always about the next shiny, fancy thing. Sometimes it's just about diving deeper on Uniswap, even deeper on Uniswap, diving deeper on concentrated liquidity. How does this work? And can you get deep on it? And that's what this channel is truly trying to do. So with that said, I'll leave 4 videos on your screen. Check them out, and we'll see you there.